Please, Clara.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you to Ernest and his team for the invitation and the opportunity to share my work with that I've done with my colleagues at the University of North Carolina. Before I get started, I also wanted to send greetings from the Association for Library and Information Science Education that is also celebrating 100 years. So we are now into our new century as a Library and Information Science Education Association. So we welcome any future collaborations. So what I wanted to do is to talk about online library and information science education in the US and Canada, and to talk about the survey that we did as we were trying to get ready.
Thanks.
Okay. So wanted to talk about the study that we did as we were getting ready to mount our program from a face-to-face and hybrid program to offer one that was both face-to-face and online, all online. So if we look back a little bit, if we look at online education in the US in general, we find that enrollment in higher education is increasing in the last 10 years at an annual rate of 2.6%. But if we look at the increase in online enrollment, then we see that the growth rate is quite high, which is at 17%. And so we see that if we look at fall of 2011, over 6.7 million students took at least one online course. And in 2008, in the fall, 600,000 graduate students took at least one online course. And if we look at the expansion of online education globally, then we see that global distance learning is of much interest, but more specifically, e-learning is the fastest growing market in education, and by 2017 is expected to increase by 23%. And when we talk about online education, then the definition that we're using and we find generally applied is that it's an online course defined as a web-based instructional method in which at least 80% of the instruction occurs via the internet. Online education in library and information studies in the United States began to be offered since the 1990s. And in the US, through the Association for Library and Information Science Education, we collect statistical data. So we started collecting statistical data about online and other hybrid methods of delivering distance education in 2000 and 2001. So in that academic year, then we found that about 14% of the course offerings were online. And then 10 years later, then we found that over 60% of the courses are online. So if you look at the graph, then you can see quite a change. You can see that what used to be light blue, which were the face-to-face campus courses, have decreased quite a bit over the last 10 years. The increase has been in online and in hybrid course offerings. The research shows that there are many motivations for individuals to want to do an online program or take online courses that can range from convenience, flexibility, affordability, and so forth. So a summary of the research shows that some of the attributes that relate to convenience and flexibility are the ability to complete the course requirements in a setting of the student's choice. That means if they want to stay at home and not travel to another city where the program is actually offered face-to-face, they can do that, so they do not need to relocate. There's also the ability to stay put and keep your current employment and not have to leave your job to go and do an MLIS program. There's ease of access to course content, so you, depending on how the program is offered, it may be asynchronous or synchronous, but if it's the case that it's asynchronous, then you can actually access the content at any time during the semester. Then another reason is that you can set your own schedule and you don't necessarily need to travel to campus. And then there's the flexibility in terms of time and physical separation. So are there any differences between these delivery modes? And we find that in terms of student achievement, there isn't any significant difference between online and traditional course delivery. Where there are differences, it's been shown that older students prefer distance education because they can stay put and stay with their families and stay with their jobs. Also, older students were more satisfied with online coursework than their younger counterparts. And also students tend to perceive, so in terms of just perception itself, they both, whether it's anyone taking online or not, the perception is that face-to-face classes are more engaging in terms of learning and interaction. And then also when it comes to student or student-to-instructor interactions, there is significance when it comes to student learning and satisfaction. So what is it that we were trying to study in our particular project? And we had 4 research questions. One is to understand the demographics of those who are doing an MLIS online coursework. Also, what factors influence students to select online MLIS coursework, and what factors are associated with student satisfaction in an online MLIS degree. And then lastly, what issues concern online MLIS students. So in terms of the research design, we conducted an online survey of the programs that are ALA accredited in North America. So that were MLIS programs in Canada and the United States. And so we had over 1,000 MLIS students respond from 36 LIS programs. And if they completed at least one online course, then the respondents were part of the sample, and so that meant that we looked at 910 respondents of the over 1,000 for our actual reporting of the findings. And then there were some areas that we wanted to look at in terms of distance from an actual face-to-face program. And so we were able to use the Google Maps API to determine driving distance from where they live to the actual program that they took the online courses. And then we also looked at the RUCA codes, which were able to determine whether they lived in an urban setting or a rural setting. And for the RUCA codes, then we only looked at the US schools because we weren't able to determine what that was for the Canadian LIS programs. So to address that first question, what are the demographic characteristics of students taking an online MLIS education? And you might not be able to see it that well, but in blue are those students that responded who took entirely online, and then in orange is the students who responded who took a partially online program. And so we find that most of the respondents were Generation X. That means that they were 29 to 47 years of age with an average of 34.3 years old. And most of them were female, about 85%. And most of them were white or Caucasian. And this particular variable might seem a bit strange for those who are not in the United States. In the United States, we're very concerned that we have access to education for everybody in society. And we have found that with a lot of the ethnic minority groups, they may not have the same kinds of opportunities. So we want to make sure that we learn whether they are responding to or participating in questionnaires, as well as whether they're participating in our education programs. So this particular representation of mainly white respondents is a reflection of the actual student populations that we have. Then in terms of participation by employment status, we found that those who are taking a full-time program are also those who are taking full-time work, and those who are mainly doing part-time online then are also holding part-time jobs. So you can see that that's one of the distinctions there. And so overall, we find that those who are doing online education are either full-time or part-time workers. Then when we look at metro status, although distance education is supposed to be for those who might live in smaller and more distant and rural areas, we find that 91% are actually living in an urban area. So that means 50,000 or more in the location that they're at. And so that was not only an interesting finding, but also this other one is interesting, where over 50% of those respondents live within 50 miles of the actual physical campus. So even though they're taking online, partially or full-time, that they can drive and take advantage of the opportunities that exist within the physical LIS program. And so you find that you have many who are partially online who are actually living very close by. So why would someone take an online class? We looked at the past literature and identified 11 statements that we wanted our respondents to address. And by doing a factor analysis, we identified that those 11 statements clustered around 3 factors: accommodation, predisposition, and selectivity. So when we looked at these 3 factors and we looked at age, we found that the older students, that's generation, the baby boomer generation, that there was a significant difference in terms of them finding that online education was accommodating. And so their motivation was those factors that you see below. They felt that an online class let them graduate sooner. It met their personal circumstances. They found the online class more convenient to their work schedule. They could travel and not attend face-to-face classes regularly, and then it suited their lifestyle. We also looked at motivation in relation to employment status, and we found that those who were fully full-time, who had full-time employment, also felt that online education accommodated them. So the 2 other factors, predisposition and selectivity, were not necessarily significant factors when it came to either employment status or when it came to age. So the third question was, what factors are associated with student satisfaction in an online MLIS degree program? So we found that when a student is taking an online coursework or degree, that practicum experiences, lectures outside of class, professional development, and social networking were very similar. They met their needs as face-to-face students experienced it. There were 4 areas that they were less satisfied, not necessarily low satisfaction, but areas that could do with a little bit more examination, and that is that career planning, placement services, academic advising, and mentoring. Those were areas that there was some satisfaction, but not a strong satisfaction. Then we also looked at 7 statements that related to how they assess online education. And these 7 statements clustered to develop an index that was either positive or negative. And so we found that there were some significant differences when it came to particular variables. And so when we looked at those particular variables that related to those 7 factors that clustered into an index, then we found that experience with online education, when we looked at full-time employment, is that there was more satisfaction, more positive experience for those who are doing full-time work and also doing full-time studies. And so those who were part-time then had more negative experiences. And we can guess that one of the reasons is because when you know that your whole program is going to be online, you know what to expect, you know how the courses are going to be delivered. While when you're in a partially online program, you may not know what the professor is going to expect in a hybrid delivery, or whether a particular course might be offered online one semester and then face-to-face another semester. So there's more fluctuation and less homogeneity of experience for the part-time students and part-time workers. Then that could also be found to be the same in terms of experience with online education for those who are commuting from a distance. So we found that those who are living closer had a more negative experience than those who were living farther away. So those who are living farther away know that they have to have the online, otherwise they wouldn't have access to education without needing to travel. So therefore, the expectations are probably lower, and the fact that they do have access to the education then makes their experience more positive. So these last two graphs can be summarized into the following, that there is more positive experience with online program delivery when it's entirely online by those who are working full-time, and then the opposite for those who are taking partially online and also working part-time. So in terms of the summary of the findings, the survey participants were mainly female, mainly white. They were employed, living in urban areas, studying partially online, and living within 50 miles of the physical program. And the average age being 34 years old. So what we found is that full-time employed students were most likely full-time online also, and part-time employed were most likely partially online. And the findings support earlier findings. And one of the things that online has done is that has open access for those who are living in urban areas but are working full-time. And partially online students that we have seen in the last few graphs are less satisfied, which may be related to the fact that they do prefer face-to-face courses and contact but may not necessarily get them. And they're also expecting a homogeneity of experience. So this leads to future research and implications that I have as wanting to know more about socialization in an online education program. What are their opportunities to get jobs? Do they get jobs in the same way as those who have a traditional face-to-face program? What are their opportunities for professional development? And also we need a more in-depth understanding of their personal experiences. And this is the first of its kind in terms of a larger survey, but we do need more surveys that relate to international experiences, maybe comparative and longitudinal studies. Then there is the opportunity for local connections, which we have found is important, even though there is those who are taking online education, they do like the fact that they can interact and go to a particular opportunity that allows for social events at the local level. In the program that I was just a part of, the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, we have a lot of our students who live an hour and a half away in the city of Charlotte. But one of the things that they do appreciate is not just that they can access our education online, but we have built many activities within that one city that allows all of the students to gather together. So that has been important. And then the last is that there are many implications for enhancing the positive experience of these online programs. It's not just offering them, but trying to determine what student support is needed, how to market them, because there is a lot of competition, especially now in the United States, and then how they can replicate or even enhance the experience of face-to-face education. And so that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.